Okay, people. Pipe down. I can wait. I'm waiting. No, I'm just... Hello, everyone. How was day 3? Was it awesome? That was fucking tepid. Was it awesome? That was much better. Sorry for my French. You don't mind, do you? Do you don't mind? Do you mind? Simonette doesn't mind. That's good. As long as Simonette doesn't mind. That's all I'm really concerned about, really. In our lives, aren't we all just concerned what... Are you... You're primarily concerned with what Simonette thinks also? Oh, my language. I'm fairly confident you don't... Yeah. We're just going to leave that right at it. My name's David Simpson. I'm still the program director at the Fine Arts Work Center. Hopefully my language won't change that. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm so glad to see all of you. Thank you for coming tonight. This is the last night of faculty talks for the 2024 summer workshop season. You are here. Thank you. It's been a great summer, and we've had a really great run of wonderful faculty talks and Q&As and readings, and we're finishing with a bang for sure tonight. We're going to hear from artist Mark Adams, beloved local artist. We're going to hear from writer Nick. Fuck, man, I've been doing this for 9 weeks, and I'm just losing my mind. I know. I'm sorry. Nick Flynn, who we all know and love, and I'm sure it's a good thing this is the last night, because God knows what will have to happen tomorrow. And we're going to finish with Simonette Quamina, wonderful printmaker, former Falk Fellow. So we're very excited. Great night. A bit of housekeeping before we start. Nick's going to be signing books at the back of the room after the event, so be sure to check that out. We have other... What? And Mark. Right, because he's got this really awesome book about the Outer Cape and the geological history that I have at home. There's 2 books, I know, but the one that I have and love is this little guy. It's so interesting. So I highly recommend it. That's my blurb. I don't think it's on the book, but it's a verbal blurb. Say that 3 times fast. Verbal blurb. Let's do it right. Starting 1, 2, 3. Verbal blurb. Verbal blurb. Verbal. That didn't. You guys are blurry too. I'm not the only one. Okay, I'm going to stop really soon. Also, check out books in the bookstore between the 2 halves of the gallery right over here. Great books by former fellows, faculty, other people with historic connections with the Fine Arts Work Center. And also, while you're at it, check out the summer exhibition, which is wonderful if you haven't already done so. It's curated by former fellow Matt Bollinger. It's called Edge Condition, and it features work by about 20 or so former Falk Fellows. Wonderful show. I would like us to all give it a big shout out, as always, for East End Books for managing our bookstore. They do such a great job. We're grateful for their partnership. And also like to thank our institutional partners, the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod and the Cape Cod 5 Foundation, who generously support our public programming in the summer. Restrooms are still down the hall on the left-hand side. We have a water fountain across from it. We have assisted listening devices. If that would help your experience, please check with Hana or Fatima at the back, and they will hook you up with one of those. Are there any cushions left? No. Cushions are a big hit. We're going to have to get more cushions for next. Although I think I saw somebody took 2. Is somebody doing it? It could have been for somebody else that they're with. I don't want to make any judgments. No lynching for... No, let's not go there. Okay, I'm just going to stop. Finally, please do us a favor, turn your cell phones to off or silent so that we can... What's that? Turn this to stun. Okay, and before I start, I want to say 2 more things, because I'm sure you want me to get off the stage as fast as possible. Sign-up sheet is coming along, but not great. So if you haven't yet signed up for the student reading tomorrow night, I encourage you to do so. I invite you to do so. No judgment if you don't, of course, but it's an incredible home crowd advantage. You will be embraced and shown a lot of love for getting up here and having the courage to read. So I invite you to do it. It's a great night. Who here has done student readings before? Good experience? Yes. Great experience. So if you haven't done it, please consider doing so. And I'd also like to give a shout out to our beloved Bert Yarborough, who's at the back. Is he somewhere over here? There he is. He's got a show opening up on Friday, the 16th, 6 to 8? 5 to 7 at Berta Walker Gallery on Bradford Street. And his show, it's a marvelous show, will be up from August 16th to September 7th. So be sure to check it out. Big hand for Bert Yarborough. And so let's get me off the stage. So we're going to start with Mark Adams. And to introduce Mark, we're going to invite one of not yet. Did I mention the merch? We have great merch and a great new T-shirt. Did you check out that T-shirt, Nick? I haven't yet. No. I'll bring you one so you can look at it. We're going to bring up one of Mark's students to introduce him. Please welcome to the stage Tia Scalcione. I'm saying that, Scalcione? Is that good? Awesome. Welcome, Tia. Come on up.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I am so thrilled to be able to introduce this special man whose class I am taking this week. Let me tell you a bit about him. Mark Adams is a painter and cartographer showing at the Schoolhouse Gallery in Provincetown, has 30 years experience in the National Park Service. That alone, I think, deserves an applause, right? We're going to embarrass him. He's exhibited installations, prints, photography, scientific illustration, video art, and was named Artist of the Year by the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod this year. Big deal. His retrospective expedition was at the Provincetown Art Association Museum in 2017. He has traveled with a sketchbook in hand around the Mediterranean, South America, Asia, and U.S. wildernesses, and has illustrated and co-authored a geologic primer, Coastal Landforms of Cape Cod, with Center for Coastal Studies geologist Graham Giese, thank you. Adams has taught at the Provincetown Art Association, Castle Hill for the Center for the Arts in Truro, the Provincetown School Academy program, and as a guest in the now defunct MFA program at the Fine Arts Work Center. He has studied ecology, landscape architecture, printmaking, and photography at University of California, Berkeley, and California College of the Arts, and with artists at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown. He has also worked as a wildlife field biologist, scientific illustrator, forest fire fighter, I didn't know that. I want to hear about that tonight. Gymnastics coach. They did some digging. This is really good. I'm learning things. I know, I'm exhausted. His current interests include geologic time, taxonomies, coordinate systems, and layering of information in maps. No, he's pretty amazing. Those of us that are lucky enough to know him, he is a part of the fabric of this place. And I've been here for 23 years, and watching Mark's work and getting to see the world through his eyes is always amazing, and he's just such a light. So without further ado, I'll introduce Mark Adams.
Thank you. I have to, I don't know if Tia recalls, but years ago we were in a play reading together of The Wind in the Willows, and Tia and I played swallows, I think, migrating, and we had little roller bags, and we ran around in circles on the stage with these roller bags pretending to be swallows ready to migrate. Remember that? So silly. Yeah, so sometimes I feel like I'm living in a dream here. Anybody feel that way? Yeah. All right, so let's see. This is a page from the class this week. You know, we're doing a lot of observational exercises. We're trying to occupy space and be observant and present on each of our walks in nature, and using methods to draw and write that are, you know, not expert. We're not being artists. We're being observers. We're being the unique lens that each person brings to a place in time. And there's only one of those. There's only one of you at this moment, at any moment, with the acuity that you bring to that moment. So, oh, I have a clicker, right? Oh, here it is. Yeah, so these are, you know, these are rough, these are experiential, using materials that I've carried around the world in my pocket, you know, walnut ink pens, and let's see. But before we go any further, I want to talk about there's been this ongoing discussion. A few people in the room were there. There was a panel, a Forum 49, Forum 24 panel about what is an artist. And it's kept us up at night since then because we weren't satisfied with what the curators and critics came up with. And I'm not going to dwell on this, but, you know, the thing that, you know, people think they aspire to is to be in the art market, to be where art is a commodity. But I just put together a quick list. It might not be everything, but, you know, art is something for all of us. It's a therapeutic practice. It's very enriching. It puts your world in context. We use it to create sacred spaces on the page. And memorials are a different species of art. And I think sometimes ruins are better than preservation. They evoke something, time maybe. And art can be emblematic of the cultural moment. But the biggest thing I want to talk about is that art is, in its best moments, is a transcendence machine. And I'm not going to say what I mean by that. But this is a Cornell box, which you could say they're sort of gimmicks, but they somehow bring together from ordinary, even cast-off objects, some ineffable trigger to emotion and memory. And so moving on, I was on a panel for Forum 24, Forum 49, where I talked about art and endangered nature. And this was an attempt to show the tides in relation to the coastline. So on the left is the actual astronomical tide, what the planets do to make high and low tide over the course of 6 months. And on the right is the real world tide that comes out of that in relation to the tide lines that are stained on the pilings of the houses on the waterfront in Provincetown. And I did a video showing the entire waterfront of Provincetown at mean sea level as eye level. And it's something that I'm trying to create a way to understand better where we sit in the water. And then time, you know, we just occupy a fraction of the top of that mountain on the left. But we can read the past, as Rachel Carson said. In every outthrust headland, there's a curving beach. In every grain of sand, there's a story of the earth. So that's kind of a motto. This is kind of my sovereignty moment of explaining where we are both in time and in relation to the people that came here first. This is the sea level for over thousands of years, and basically there's 400 feet of sea level rise, 400 some feet of sea level rise that happened before Cape Cod was really created. That's 6,000 years ago. When sea level stabilized up there at zero, that was about 6,000 years ago, when the kind of equilibrium of today was established of waves and tides and the normal erosion rates. And so that's our background. But what I want to say is that there were people here through some of those thousands of years, maybe 12,000, maybe 20,000 years, who saw those changes. We haven't seen those changes, we modern people. And I threw in this continental shelf map to show where the mastodons were, or where they've been found, where mastodon bones have been found. But that was the extent of the land that was occupied by the people of the First Light when they came here. So this is, again, perspective of time and geography in the land. And they were a sea people, and they watched sea level rise hundreds of feet. So we might be able to learn something from their culture. So I made, oops, go back. I made this map that shows that picture. You can kind of see on the left, that yellow is the coastal plain that existed when the first people came. And I put some of the animals on there just as to try to reimagine the map of Cape Cod as it was experienced by the first people. And then I also do a lot of these exercises around these maps, these big maps that I make, where we talk about the psychology of place and create our own environmental autobiographies. How did the place shape you? We all carry that autobiography of place with us, and it's there influencing where our security is in the world, and what is wonderful to us and what's scary, and how we navigate it. And we are these animals. We're the same animals that evolved to live in the landscape as the landscape changes. So, so I had the opportunity to make. Well, I wanted to get out of the gallery space and do some big things, and I got the opportunity to use a dance club to hang some big pieces of art and occupy that space. I created this from some leftover sailcloth, this life-size right whale, and we hung that. And then let's see, that was there's the for scale, but I guess I don't have a slide of the. Later on there's a slide showing the whole installation, but here's another piece that's on the pier right now, a 20-foot mural representing the tides, the extreme high tides of the Gulf of Maine, which is a project that I've sort of proposed and is underway, but there's a lot of technical problems about doing murals in the ocean. But it's allowed me to do a lot of research into what the tide does, and here's a kind of a mock-up of what that mural project might look like on the seawall in the center of town. The engineers are not giving me the go-ahead to attach panels to this wall yet, but I'm trying to figure out ways to better visualize, use the world as a gauge, as a calendar, as a way to teach what water does. So this was the map that was in the dance club. I started doing just random drawings of marine animals, and then I put in an ink drawing of a map, and then we printed it on marley, which is a dance floor material used by a lot of dance companies, and hung the whale. And the students did the sort of marine debris hangings and sculpture. And we occupied that space, and we had a DJ, and the bar was open, and we did performances. A dance company came and did a piece on it. And so I'm just exploring for ways to bring art into the world and allow people to occupy it, and maybe they'll spur questions and give a different understanding of scale and time. And then I took the whale on the road to Nick's barn, Nick and Lily's barn, which it's fun to have something you can bring to a barn dance. So another thing, I'm going to show some sketchbook pages, and I've been working on border issues. It's my own personal research and a way to make art and travel meaningful. And even here in the Cape, let's see. Well, so we've been working with some groups in Hyannis raising money for Latinx in Action, which is a welcome center for immigrants on the Cape. And one of the things that we find is you can open the door and invite people say we're inclusive and we're inviting everyone, but sometimes you have to go where they are. You can't. No one has the motivation to show up for you just because we welcome them. So been working in Hyannis with using drawings to raise money for this place. And I also went down to the Texas border in Brownsville and with my sketchbook in hand. And this is mostly Haitian family, but we sat at a table at the border in Brownsville. I was only there for a few weeks, but it was very enlightening and allowed me to talk to people and hear some of their stories. We've distributed food and clothes, and mostly because of our system, they're sent on their way very quickly, sometimes with not much of an idea of where they're going. These are our so-called legal immigrants who have used an app to get an appointment to cross the border. They're met instantly by the border guards who register them for an asylum claim, and then they're hustled to a shelter and then to a bus. And Texas wants them to move on their way. But they're very happy to be across the border, and it's unknown. They told me, don't go to Mexico, it's dangerous. But one of the volunteer women who was working there, she's a church lady with a cane, and she's like, Mark, we're going, you want to go? And like within minutes, I was in her station wagon. We had bought $1,000 worth of rice and pasta, and we drove straight into the camp in Matamoros. There was no one, there was no one there but the people and their tents. And I could talk for a long time about the organization and support or lack thereof. But this is a kid I met, a Mosquito from Honduras. That's his culture, and he's, it may say in there, but he's a young kid he's waiting for his cell phone message to tell him that he's free to cross the border. Really smart kid with, but one of many who are just super patient and very open to this, and your heart goes out to them. And then also in Tijuana. In El Paso, we took this family. We actually, in Juarez, we took this family to help them with some plane tickets and stuff. They couldn't cross the border, but if they kept moving around in Mexico, they had better chances. And then I spent some time in, hopefully some of these slides I might have shown before, but this guy is a Palestinian who ended up in refugee camp. I was volunteering in a welcome center outside the refugee camp in Lesbos in Greece. And he's, again, about the same age. He's like 20 years old, 21. And he showed me on his cell phone a video he took of being halfway between Turkey and Greece in the sinking boat with mothers and children, maybe 30 people in this boat. And he could not get the engine started. They had the smugglers pushed them off and say, "You're on your own. Here's the throttle. Just go towards Greece." And the engine stopped, and he said, I took the oar and I smashed the engine cover and I tore it off, and I found a way to wrap a rope around, and if it was me, I would just have jumped in the water and swam. I don't care for my life, but there were other people, and I had to do this, and he made it. And he had been at least two, maybe three generations of his family was living in a camp in Lebanon. Had a really good asylum claim, but the system couldn't accommodate it, and but this was his route through Turkey to Greece and applying for asylum there. He's a cool guy, and and I met many people. One of the ways that you can use a sketchbook in a place in a situation like this is you can't. You don't want to take pictures. It's really disrespectful, but you can draw portraits, and people feel recognized when you draw their portrait. This was one of my English students in Lesbos, and they were very advanced. Obviously some of them came. They're actually highly educated, and they had professions before they hit the road and migrated. But I was like, what can we talk about in our conversation class? And I had this Mary Oliver poem. and I started to read it with them, and then I was like, uh-oh, what will you do with your one wild and precious life? Is this the wrong thing to talk about with people who have no idea where their life's going, or no control over where their life's going? Actually, she had a very strong idea what she wanted to do and what she, and her goals and her training. And they all said, of course, we all think about this all the time. We all claim our precious life, and we have every intention of answering that question. This is, even if it takes years for us to get back into a world where we have more control. There's another kid I met on the dock in Samos. There's just a lot of stories, and his sister and brother. I was like, this is the ugliest portrait I could possibly draw. But their father was there going, oh yeah, my kids, my children, you drew them. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So yeah, a few more sketchbook pages from Samos, Lesbos. This is ironic about, history rhyming. And I'm going to forget the details. In the early part of the 1900s, there was Greece and Turkey exchanged populations. The Turks were expelled from Greece, and the Greeks were expelled from Turkey. And there's a monument there to all these people became refugees after being assimilated and living in these countries. And it was part of, I think, the whole redrawing of the map of Europe around World War I, basically. But they still think about it. There's still places in Athens that have, are named after Turkish neighborhoods, and vice versa in Istanbul. What's he called? The head of the Greek Orthodox Church still has a cathedral in Istanbul. There's remnants of this tearing apart of this displacement of people. It's still there, and so. But we met to protest what the EU is doing to restrict migrants at the statue that commemorates this 1922 displacement. I'm going to skip through. These are just sketchbook pages. It's good to draw the map sometimes, because do you even know where Afghanistan is? Could you answer the question, what are its neighbors? Samos. And then, so when I left, that was just as the pandemic was starting, but we had we didn't know we were in Greece, and I started this is dramatic. It sounds dramatic, but I was never in any danger. But these neo-Nazis had come from Europe to the island, sort of barricading the streets, starting bonfires, trashing our vehicles, and eventually we had to be evacuated. The volunteers were especially targeted because we were helping migrants. And if you help migrants, even at the Texas border or in Europe, you can be charged as a human smuggler, just for handing out water, helping somebody out of a boat. This stuff everyone should know about. But the day after we were evacuated from Lesbos, these arsonists burned our school to the ground, and so we couldn't go back. And so I was traveling across Europe by train, and then they started closing the borders for the pandemic, and it was just a moment where I was thinking, what do I do now? But I have all the options. I had all the freedom. I went back through London and came back, and started working remotely and back with the National Park Service. Just a couple more slides. This was I like making graffiti walls, so I do a simple drawing and everyone can add to it. So this was used for the town's coastal resiliency forum recently. We're doing a plan for the coast in Provincetown, how to adapt over time, and we drew this, and it's been trotted out, and people love the chance to write their name, maybe something more important on it. Just my studio shot, recent work. I'm trying to use the language of painting to, on that original list, to kind of declare in a new way what's sacred, It's not authority and money and capitalism and the church, but these people, all of us, are members of this population of people who are potentially displaced. We are all subject to floods and coastal change, but also politics. And so I've been trying to make some work that uses the visual language of painting to commemorate things like land back and let's see, the ocean is so stormy. One stormy ocean, many boats. We think that's somebody else's storm. That's somebody else's storm, but it's all everybody's storm. We just happen to all be in different boats in the storm. So these are just details from those paintings, and that's what I'm doing. So thank you.
More applause for Mark Adams, please. That was wonderful. Thank you, Mark. I was kind of hoping for something on wrestling, on gymnastics, so that's okay. Next, we're going to hear from Nick Flynn. Yes. Will I ever live that down? No, that's probably the right answer. Anyway, and to introduce Nick, I'm gonna invite one of his students to the stage. Please welcome Michelle Ferrari.
Hi. I'm so excited to be here and introduce Nick because I've been here for this week, the last 2 years, and I've been sort of having FOMO of looking at Nick's class. Nick Flynn is a poet and memoirist, but more than anything, he's an artist whose work transcends categories. Nick's work negotiates the boundaries of language and structure as he examines the complex ways we move through our time here as humans, who are joyous, vulnerable, confused, and imminently fallible. Nick is prolific, having published 12 books, including my favorites, Another Bullshit Night in Suck City, which is the best title to say, and The Ticking is the Bomb. In each of his books, he prods at the tension between past and present, personal and political, peace and perplexity. Through the lyrical exploration of his very particular experience, we come to see ourselves and better understand our own struggles to find a way in the world. In our class this week, Nick encouraged each of us to honor the wild energy of our work in order to push deeper into our voices and find new ways to think about our stories. He's the best kind of teacher, one who doesn't make you feel like he stands apart and has all the answers. Instead, Nick asks you, first, to go swimming, but then second, to get in the boat and join the expedition towards prose that aims for both truth and bewilderment. I'm delighted to bring Nick to the stage.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's been a great week. Really, thanks to my students, to the Work Center, and to my students. It's been really great. For tomorrow, I'm going to read new stuff, and I'm encouraging you all tomorrow during the student reading to read new stuff also. So I'm starting you out. My students will hear something that I just wrote yesterday in this piece. This is a piece that I read. It's a book I'm working on. I think it's a book, and I began it last year, and I read for the first time here a really rough piece last year here, and this is sort of the continuation. I don't think I've read it anywhere else because this is the only place I would read something this new. Maybe that's not true, but it's about Provincetown. It's about in my 20s. I lived on a boat in Provincetown for many years. And it's about that. And it's also about a friend of mine that I made, and you'll see him in a little bit. I only have 2 slides. I have this one. And this is the boat I lived on. This is the boat I lived on in Provincetown. There's a trigger warnings. This contains ecological collapse, hurricanes, horse baths, drug use, homelessness, mental illness, and my daughter. It's called Patience and Deliverance. It starts with waking up, no land in sight. It starts with a foghorn, but from ship or lighthouse, impossible to know. Are we drifting toward or away? Are we drifting at all? It starts on a foggy morning, the fog so thick it is unclear which direction is shore and which is open ocean. Either way, it's okay, the not knowing. Boat is a word. I woke up one day living inside it. I woke up one day and I was working on a pier. I was the captain. My job was to tend the moorings, to ferry people to shore once they'd tied up their boats. My job was to sign them in, to collect the fee. I am the ferryman, I told myself, and these are my dead. We call it a field, that part of the harbor we've carved out for ourselves, between Cabral's and the Coast Guard piers. Our workboats are named Deliverance and Patience. Today is deliverance, tomorrow is patience. Denny is the boss. He dropped all the moorings. He services the boats. I fire up the engines, circle the field. I am a shepherd, and these are my sheep. If someone waves from their deck, I will come up beside them. I might even say, ahoy. When you live in a boat, strangers will come up to you and say, I always wanted to live in a boat. Then why don't you, you answer. But you know why. To keep a boat afloat, you must keep the ocean out, until nearly every waking hour is spent doing just that. This boat, it must fit inside your head until there's no room inside for anything else. Everything else pushed to the corners. This is all you will have room for. Anchor, pump, weather. It's all you can think. Anchor, pump, weather, for years. Boat is a word. I woke up one day living inside it. It's in sections. I forgot to say this. This is 2. My daughter believes we have only 20 years left. All her friends believe that. They see themselves everywhere. Children buried in rubble, mountains on fire. The earth will keep spinning, she tells me. Maybe hotter, maybe wetter. It's just us who will be gone. It's us mostly who cause all the suffering anyway. How to convince her otherwise when I half believe it myself? I lived on boats for years, I tell her, waiting for the flood that never came. I kept waking up in the same town, my body wrapped in salt, as if I'd been preserved. I mean, I hadn't washed the salt off from the night before. I mean, I almost never washed it off. Thus began my life of pulling on oars, of making my way in a little boat to a bigger boat. I moved inside the bigger boat. A year became 10. Do you believe in ghosts, she asks. We're now talking about the astral plane, how we are made of stardust, how we are from the same exploding star. On our backs, looking into the sky, we trace lines into the darkness to suggest a diamond. There have always been storms, I tell her. Beneath the ocean, scientists have found sinkholes full of debris, mangroves and lava and bones left there by each storm. They can now find traces from hurricanes 15,000 years old. It gathers in layers which act like clocks. They call them blue holes. They say they are full of ghosts. What will fill the blue holes of today? What will they find in that submerged tunnel of us? The last white rhino, one ivory-billed woodpecker, all the old-growth forests. We needed so much. Field of coffee, field of poppy. We hold them in our hands and the world goes away. We open our eyes and the world is gone. That diamond in the sky, it's the constellation Butes. That's where we were born. Yes, I believe in ghosts. 3. A spiral on TV, sky turns to cloud. Look to the tops of the trees, turn on the radio, get in the boat. Slow at first, the storm comes as if it might miss us. We give it a name as if it were a newborn, but it isn't a name it responds to. The radio uses the word landfall. It tells us what it's already wrought down the eastern seaboard. It tells us when it will find us and how long it will stay. Rain can flatten the ocean or rile it up. This one is already turning each wave white, the salt showing its teeth. I always knew this was how it would end. What will we find in this storm besides each other? The world's oceans are heating up. Warm oceans make more hurricanes. Hurricanes, the most powerful storm known to man. One day, I tell her, I will build you a boat. This boat will hold you like a mother holds her child. It will feel that close. But if you get into that boat, then a storm will come. That's the way it works. After days of water flat as a dime, after days of sky blue as an egg, you will wake up inside it. Shore will drift further and further away from you then, until one day you won't be able to find it at all. 4. At low tide, you can walk nearly all the way out to the boat, wading through eelgrass and broken oyster shells. The last 100 yards or so, your head will be underwater, unless you swim. Some swim, but most row. I collect rowboats that wash up after storms, patch them up and leave them on the beach. If the owners come, they can take them back, but the owners never come. I stash the oars in the tall grass or in a friend's deck, like hiding your car keys under your sun visor. Some nights it's impossible to get warm. The ocean seeping into every fiber, the blankets heavy with it, the cushions. If there is sun the next day, then everything will be dragged out, draped over the gunnels. If the rain doesn't end, then everything will begin to mold so quickly, and some days the rain doesn't end. I try to catch it in buckets on the back deck. Otherwise, every cup has to be hauled in from land, rowed in, carried. The scupper balanced on my shoulder to get it into the boat. Aquarius, the water bearer, is my sign, so this is my fate. The scupper is one of those blue 5-gallon plastic jugs you tip upside down into a water dispenser. I have a few. I fill one with a hose on the deck. Then I row it out, hoist it on board, then boil it for tea, boil it to wash. Horse baths mostly, year upon year of horse baths. I'd been living on boats for 5 years at this point. Understand, these boats were dead things in the water, dead as in no engine. Why no engine? Because we didn't understand engines, because we weren't motorheads, because engines cost money and we didn't have any money, because we don't need no stinking engines. We just needed someplace to lay our heads each night. A boat was a husk. I too was little more than a husk then. My resume handwritten in pencil, since I really hadn't done much of anything yet. This hollowed out boat was my only home. Boat is a word. I woke up one day living inside it. It woke up inside me as well. It was the deal I'd made, so I wouldn't have to look at what was really inside. Not yet, not ever. If the boat wasn't inside me, crowding out every other thought, then what would come flooding back in would be worse. It could destroy you, those thoughts. It could put you in another bad place. I know, I'd seen it. In my bunk before sleep, I listen. I swear I can hear the anchors creeping across the sand. Eelgrass could foul them. A lobster could foul them. I read a Coast Guard pamphlet that warns, the ocean is always looking for a way into your boat. I read that chronically lonely flies overeat and lose sleep. I read that we share 99% of our DNA with chronically lonely flies. I read that death is weirder than we think, that light from the sun takes 8 minutes to reach Earth, that the Earth and that there's a hole in the sun, and that it is expanding. I say, behold, the bottomless pit. 5. In dreams, the boat is always about to break free. The bow line is always chafing. I need to wrap it again with a piece of hose and duct tape where it passes through the chalk. From shore, I look to see the water line is sitting low in the water. In dreams, the anchor line runs all the way to shore and into a hole in the earth. At high tide, the entire ocean will follow it down. The dream anchor reaches underground to what holds me here, all that I cannot see. It is a portal, a hole in the earth the anchor has fallen into. What is the option? To follow it down or to slowly pull it back up? My hometown had a huge anchor mounted on a cement slab in front of the bank. It was a metaphor for how secure our money would be, but everyone knew that the anchor had been salvaged from a shipwreck. In this town, there are salvaged anchors everywhere, rusting and majestic. If I could, I'd step out onto the black water and see if it could hold me. I'd walk as far as I could before sinking. Like Jesus, if I sank, swimming was always an option. I imagined the afterlife would be me swimming, breathing, swimming, eternity. The veil between us and God is very thin then, was very thin then. If I wanted, I could reach out and touch that mystery. Or was it just a school of tiny fish passing below me? 6. As a teenager, I painted my ceiling blue. It was like sleeping under the sky or at the bottom of the ocean. We lived near the ocean, so I left my window open to let the salt air wash over me. It was all around us, but we couldn't see it. The salt, I mean, each crystal refracting the sun. I had a friend, Phil. His family had a boat. The first time we tried to get high was out on that boat, but all we could find was dirtweed. We filled the tiny cabin with smoke, but I didn't feel a thing. I mean, I didn't feel any different. It just made more questions like, why wasn't the ocean white? And where did all the salt go? In the clouds, in your eyes. It was something not to feel. Maybe that was the point. My mother had begun to fade, but I didn't know how to say it. Phil's mother was made of light, always offering something, always a good to see you, always a say hi to your mother for me. What we didn't say was that forgetting was all around us. Like the salt, we just couldn't see it. It was a woman on her porch calling her dogs inside over and over. It was, if I forget you, carved into a tree. It was a heart someone used to practice their knife throw, painted on the wall of an abandoned house. Forgetting was what we were looking for when we went out. Bottles of forgetting. 7. I'd been living on a boat the summer before my mother died. Suddenly was the word the obituary used. A friend gave me a book that was supposed to help me grieve. This book said it was best not to make any major life changes after something like that happened, but it didn't say how long that period of no change should last. I'd been living on a boat for the past 2 summers, so after she died, I made my way back to that same boat. But it was still winter, too cold for the boat to go back in. I didn't know where my body should be. I must have drifted up into Boston for a while. I must have known people there, friends. I'd stare at the map on the subway wall, which had a little circle on it, and in this circle the word you, which at that moment meant me, but in the next moment could be you, if you were also unsure of where it was you were going, of where you had landed, of how to set out. What time is it? Eternity. What room is this? Eternity. You are here, distilled down to this one word. The word is you. I stayed in that wilderness for months. I never went inside. I kept trying to go inside, but inside felt like a coffin. I slept in my car. I slept in the boat. I slept in the beds of all my friends. I needed the dark to be held. It was winter in Boston, the tail end of everything. A prophet was leaving signs all over the city, portents on cardboard in neat black letters, written with a thick black magic marker. You know those newspaper boxes you slide a few quarters into so you can pull them open? A cardboard sign in the front with the day's headlines. He'd flip this cardboard and write his own headline on the back. The person beside you isn't real. Bank of Boston is a front. Close your eyes, we're going down. Then he'd slide it back into the box, so this was the new headline. It was clear, to me at least, that all of this, whatever it was, eternity, wilderness, would soon end. One morning, the sign on the newspaper box in the corner read, "Secret passage, press button." A little button drawn on the cardboard inside a circle, but it was not a button you could press. 8. I'm going to shift this slide now. See, I'm very low tech. I only have 2 slides. I hope I go the right way. There we go. On the edge of this town is a fence. It is built of branches no one can use. It is where the crows go each night to roost. At sunset, you can see them gathering in the sky, black wings all pointing in the same direction. We could drive there, park below them, beside the fence, and just listen. It's not just that they come together each night. It's not just that they find each other, but that they know. They know something we do not, which is how they are actually one thing, spread out over many fields. I met Richard the summer I dragged the boat to this town. Sometimes he'd sleep over if it was too rough. Sometimes he'd sleep over if it wasn't too rough. His torso was like one of Michelangelo's slaves, pulling himself out of the rock. Have you seen the slaves? A dozen of them line the hallway in Florence that leads to the David. Each one is caught in the same moment, half man, half stone, arms upraised, attempting to free himself. Some scholars believe that each is unfinished, But I saw each of them as trapped in something they could never escape. The rock was what they were made of. Thank you.
Can we have another big round of applause for Nick Flynn? Amazing. Thank you. Finally, we're going to hear from Simonette Quamina, printmaker and artist extraordinaire. And to introduce Simonette, we're going to invite one of our students to the stage. Please welcome Susan Porter.
Thank you. I have the awesome privilege of introducing Simonette tonight, and I'm going to talk a little bit about being her student. But first, I want to give you her background. So, Simonette Quamina, her, was born in Ontario, Canada, and spent her early childhood living between South America, the Caribbean, and New York City. Her diverse upbringing is constantly woven into the narratives of her large-scale drawings, prints, and collages. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree at City College of New York and an MFA in printmaking from Rhode Island School of Design. She is the recipient of the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts Studio Program in New York. She is the recipient of the 2017-18 Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center residency and the 2017 Salem Artworks Fellowship. And she was also nominated for the prestigious 2020 Queen Sonia Print Award. Her work has shown both nationally and internationally, and it has been acquired for public and private collections, including the Fleet Library and the North Dakota Museum of Art. She maintains an active studio in New York City and is an assistant professor at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. I have taken a lot of printmaking courses over the last 10 years or so, and I have to say that Simonette has taught me more than I ever expected to learn from this class. I came really on vacation to relax and have fun, as I told you. But she has this spirit, and she has so much depth of information and so much encouragement of students that I'm so glad that I was, able to be in her class this year. I had no idea what to expect, but she's absolutely amazing. So that's my 2 cents.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to try and get through this. Oh, boy. So I'll apologize in advance. There are some images that some of you may have seen before. But before I start, for me, this is a week of learning and sharing, and it made sense for me to also, because this is also a place that is such a pivotal moment in the way my art career has moved. I thought it makes sense to kind of also share where I am now and the work that's still on the walls in the studio. So, and we're talking about learning and sharing. Sometimes it's easy to, you walk into a gallery space or you walk into a museum and you see a completed piece, but you don't really know the process behind what it took to get to that point. So I thought maybe I'll include a bit of that or welcome you into my studio practice, opposed to just showing you the final pieces, if that's okay with everybody, right? But first, I'll kind of share with you how I even got here, and I'll try to go very quickly and briefly. I'll go through them. So I started I'm starting from my MFA, from the point of my last year of my MFA program, and trying to figure out what my visual language was and where I fit into the history of printmaking as a woman of color and someone who's also an immigrant, dealing with ideas of dislocation, having to readjust to new cultural and social norms and so forth. So I thought a good way into understanding that or finding my voice would be to work through the ideas of narrative storytelling, and how do I fit my own story into some of the narratives that already exist. So I revisited Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, and that was a starting point for me, but I also gave myself a set of rules in which I had to follow in order to create the work. So I'm working from materials that were readily available, found materials. I wasn't going out and purchasing things. I was a student, didn't have that much money. So I rely on old discarded frames that the John Hay Library at Brown University would discard, because I was a TA there at Brown. And I would ask, like, hey, could I get the frames? Or sometimes I would go to the RISD Museum, their conservation, print and study room, the conservators, would change out some of the frames, and they were still archival museum boards that I would then kind of squirrel away, take to my studio, and then start working from that, right? So I'm thinking, well, how could I use, I'm a printmaker, I'm using these found materials, how could I use it as a matrix or the surface from which I can make or generate an image from? And that started to create or generate more ideas from that, right? So I'm thinking about different techniques, relief printing, and then also thinking not only of the print as the final end goal or the final piece, but what happens to the actual matrix, the thing that creates the image, right? It's part of that history. And so that's where my focus kind of shifted. So still thinking about narrative and thinking about where I'm generating inspiration from. I was looking at printmakers, Albert Dürer, and looking at compositions and how the figure fits within those compositions and the context of the work, and trying to create my own language around that. So hence, on the right, this is my interpretation of Dürer's The Four Witches, but all using archival boards and then printing or preparing them as if they were going to run through a printing press, but not running them through the press. And that one's about 9 feet tall. My practice also goes between not just prints and what I would call sculptural prints, but I was also investigating the whole idea of narrative through books and also including prints from that. So in between that, I'm still writing, and sometimes ideas come from conversations with friends, old memories, and families and family members and so forth. So this is a large handmade book using relief prints, some rubbings, relief prints in the sense that the reliefs were used for rubbings instead of actual prints. And I always make the joke, like, you know, as I talk, you get a sense of the middle child syndrome coming out. So there's a lot of like, well, no, I'm not gonna do it that way, I'll do the other way, right? And also going back to this whole idea of found material. So the book cover you just saw previously, that's from discarded boards from the museum, the backings of those frames that prints and drawings would sit inside of. I would go thrift shopping, and then I would find like old cassettes, and I would then, how would this function as a book? How could this tell a story, right? We listen to music, but how could that function as a narrative in another way? So I would take these cassettes, and then I would introduce this technique of dry pointing, drawing directly on the surface of the cassettes because it was acetate plastic. Ink them up, but they would never run through the press, obviously, because they would, you know, crack apart. But then as I'm doing this, I'd be a little cheeky, and I found an old recorder, and I don't know how many of you in old school where you stuff the inside with a little piece of paper, so then you can, the little 2 squares on the top of the cassette, and you could re-record on top of it, yeah? Did I just show my age? Okay, so then I would re-record myself telling these narratives, and you would hear the scratching or the drawing of the image on the case, and inside I would then insert, there were images that would then be printed and put into, see, these are etchings that would then go into each individual book, as I would call them, cassette books. And so once leaving, graduate school, it was, well, thank you for your tuition and goodbye. Figure out how to make, right? And not having access to a printing press, which I think was one of the best things that might have happened to me, because it really forced me to start using materials that were really familiar but in unfamiliar ways to do the same things that the print would do. So I was really borrowing from some of the aesthetics of the print, but through the act of drawing. So I was relying heavily on using just tape, graphite, and paper. And just my body as a drawing tool, either to do rubbings or to remove some of the graphite, the materials back out. I was relying heavily on hand printing as a way to generate imagery and also to make prints that would then get collaged back into the pieces. So that kind of really set me down this like kind of rabbit hole of collaging and printmaking, or hand printing, I would say. This one's called Round Robin. And even then, I'm still thinking I call these drawings, but as I'm doing the drawings, I'm also still thinking about techniques in printmaking. So the image on the left really shows you kind of this idea of working on the copper plate, working through the avenues of metal through drawing, but instead I'm drawing blindly onto the paper with an embossing tool. So I'm really pushing the fibers below the surface as if it were a plate, like the removal, but I'm not removing, I'm just pushing it down, and then it gets rubbed with graphite over it, and it starts to emulate the same process of a dry point or an etching. Also thinking about how, just with these limited materials, how I can still continue the act of drawing or continue the act of the line. So I really started exploring the torn edge of the paper. So when we think in terms of printmaking, and the quality of the paper that is used, it's very specific. It's, tends to be softer, cotton rag, and if it has a deckled edge, it's one of the aesthetics of the print paper, right? You don't want the straight, clean edge, but the deckle. So I started really emphasizing that torn edge and figuring out if I were to tear the paper forward or tear it away from me, it holds the medium very differently. And when I say medium, I didn't even go into my only medium is graphite. So everything you see here is graphite. And so I really started exploring or trying to understand what it can do and what the limits, what are its limitations. So I would use it for inks that I would then print with. I make printmaking inks out of the graphite, powdered graphite. There are different forms of the graphite, just making it into washes, making it into bases from which I can then silk screen under paintings or under drawings with that I would then work back on top of. And then also using the graphite as a way to really continue that edge of drawing by rubbing the edges of the paper that I tear. And that continues the act. Oh, so here's this one's called Mr. Farrell's Plum Rose Tree. And as you know, sometimes, graphite it's a beautiful thing, but it could be quite tricky as well, because in some cases it wants to absorb light, and in other cases it wants to repel the light as well, which kind of brings me around to where I am in my studio practice now. So this is kind of where things start to change a little bit. And I thought it was good to show this because quite often, you come in, you have this idea, you have these sketches, and you're like, I'm gonna do this, this is the final goal, but sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. Coming from the traditions of printmaking, there's this idea of creating the same image, multiples of the same image, and it's very technical, and sometimes there's this rigidity to it. So I go into the studio trying to allow myself grace for the work to be able to change. And sometimes I'm willing to just tear something up, and if it's just not working or it doesn't feel right or it doesn't feel honest, like I leave it alone or it becomes something else. So that previous piece that you saw, the one I showed you before, the narrative didn't feel right. However, I was experimenting with, well, how do I change the narrative of a piece depending on where the person enters the room or how they move around the piece. And that's where this idea started to come from. And it'll make more sense when we get closer to where I am in the work. So that piece got ripped up, torn apart, repieced, and then I introduced parts of the prints. I threw this in here for those of you in my class who are doing silk aquatints right now. And this is a large silk aquatint that was then printed very painterly, and then it was collaged back into this piece. And so I just kind of threw this in here so you can kind of see the scale of it. So it's about 13 feet. And this was a piece that was made for an exhibition at the Museum El Barrio in New York. And just all graphite, right? So this one is called Sing a Song, My Little Kiskadee. Really relying on relief printing as well, and graphite, and really pushing the boundaries of what the paper can do as well as the graphite, which involves quite a bit, sometimes sanding and going back and tearing and so forth. And so as I'm doing these larger pieces, these graphite pieces on paper, I'm also still thinking about the function of the matrix. So I started working while I was here. I had to throw this in just for kind of like, comfort. This was actually made right here at the Fine Arts Work Center, which kind of brought me back into really working from collagraphs and thinking of the function of the matrix as a thing by itself, and also the addition of the prints that came from that. And these are, I'm showing you these again because these are all done here. This is the moment when things started shifting, being able to have a space here and the time to focus on the work and allow it to evolve the way that it needed within those months during the residency Okay, so Confirmation Victoria's Regia. This is all monoprints on Japanese paper then I would kind of piece and collage back together. So even though it looks like it's one piece, it's kind of seamed back together. So it feels like it's printed a really large print. And it's loosely based on the national flower of Guyana in South America. And this is the Victoria Amazonica lily, which is one of the largest lilies in the world. And it pretty much produces this flower that blooms and attracts scarab beetles, and anyway. So kind of just skipping through, found materials, tearing paper, collaging back on, remnants from the studio. I don't throw things away, so things come back together. And so within this coming back together, they start to form new ideas and help me to have a better understanding of the edge, composition, and so forth. And then I go back and forth between the larger pieces and pieces like that, just kind of a detailed shot. And these are all, so at this point, I'm starting to explore screen printing with graphite, because a lot of complaints was like, well, graphite rubs off too, and I figured out a way in which it doesn't rub off, right? But also thinking of the works not just as drawings, but how does it fall into the language of painting as well? So I started using the screen printing as a way to build grounds of layers up, and then I can start to rework and go backwards and forwards on the surface. This one's called The Night Gardener, and using relief print, collagraphs, and graphite drawing on paper. So a lot of my edges tend to be shaped, and they're always strategic. It's with consideration of how the viewer enters the work and how they are able to navigate through the narrative of it. And depending on where you enter that work or which edge, that narrative can also change. So this is kind of where I am now. Weaving, cutting, piecing things back together, and really still trying to understand that language of the line and the edge and how it functions within the work. So, welcome to the studio. So this is where I am now, and I put that up just so you can kind of see yeah, a little bit of the dirt, the mess, but part of the process, it's a lot of testing and, you know, what could the graphite do? What could the bases do? I'm also experimenting with a little hint of color. So some blue pigment that a friend brought back from Morocco, and I decided to somehow bring that back into the pieces, well, at least this piece that I'm working on. And this one's called Kachupaku Buses Back and Saldum, but I can explain the meaning later. So I just kind of wanted to show you like how the work just kind of evolves, you know, because I can show you the finished thing and I'm like, you might say, oh, okay. But there's always a struggle, and this is how my studio gets cleaned all the time, because I have to walk out, peek, come back in, sweep, clean up, and so forth. So it goes through several steps of transformation after the testings of washes of graphite, and then I'll have to cut stencils that I can start to build these underpaintings with, and then starting to figure out the patterns for the relief prints and the rubbings that get collaged back into the work. And so you can kind of see how it gradually evolves over a period of time. And I have to apologize, these are all iPhone photos. These are all fresh. It's still on the wall, not off the wall, right? And so, you know, just kind of mapping things out, things get extended. Like I said, I allow myself space or a little bit of room for that, the narrative to continue and to change as well, and not be so kind of rigid and let the work do what it needs to. So this is where it is, and I'm really playing around with how a narrative changes based on the nature of the material. So it's graphite. So you probably won't see that much in this photograph because I don't have other ones, different angles, but you'll see it in some of the other works that I'm working on now. So there's a lot of collaging, cutting, piecing back together to make things seamless. Also, the work is also about being seen, and if you're willing to give it the time it needs for things to show up or to reveal themselves, then they will. At first glance, you might not notice, but there's always a figure or someone being seen or participating in viewing. And even the viewer themselves are a part of that process. This one's called Missing the Mark. And these are, you know, and so once again, the process, printing some of the parts, I hand print everything, and then I have to cut each piece by hand, like all the little pieces. And then they get collaged back in, so if there's elements for the hair, that's hair that I braid, sew together, ink it up, print it by hand on Japanese paper, and then it gets cut back and pasted back into the pieces. So it starts to feel a bit seamless. So just drawing through the act of collaging as well. So yeah, so here's another one. It goes through from a quick sketch, an idea, to the ugly stage, and then you're like, what did I do? And then here we are now, where I'm really starting to, so lighting also is really important. So if you notice the one on the left, it's really dark, but with the right lighting, it starts to look shiny, but it's all white, or reads as white, but it's all graphite. So the work changes as you walk around. This should be a video. How do you play this? So, I don't know if you can really see that well. So it goes from shiny, like the bottom parts, and then it will go to black, and then you can come back, and then the work is just, so that's the place I'm in now. This is all new, so it's just kind of like, and then that's it shot at a different angle, and the thread might look white, but it's actually graphite, and then if you go another way, it may read as black. So this one's called Catch You by Moon Night, and here it is. And there are a lot of little small details that the camera, this is all iPhone pictures, so forgive me. And yeah, that's where I am now. Sorry, I had so many images. I was
stage, do a little Q&A. How about that? We're going to get everybody situated. If you have a question, wait to get for Hunter or Fatima to bring you a mic so we can hear you at home.
What spot do you want? I'm the middle child, really?
We all know.
You put me, you too? Yeah. That's Mario. That's right. Oh, Nick, are you a middle child or are you the oldest? You're the youngest.
Oh, he's older than you?
The questions have started already amongst themselves. We're talking about birth order.
I have a question for Simonette. What material is frottage?
Oh, frottage.
Frottage. I know it in another term.
It's all that printmaking. It's all about rubbing.
Could you imagine me trying to explain that during classes? Yeah. See, sometimes I get the
I
look.
saw it up there. I'm like, wow, what is that?
Is this on? Yeah, it's the art of taking rubbings from surfaces. So Rauschenberg used it quite a bit, Max Ernst. I know so many artists in the past, it's just the art of rubbing. But, sometimes we think of taking rubbings from something. It goes back to that memory of taking a rubbing from a coin with your pencil and just kind of like, right? But then you see the little scratchy marks and you're like, eh. Right, so there's this, but, with practice and understanding the materials, I'm able to kind of really use that quite a bit as a printing method within the studio as well.
You're like an action printer. Everything comes from these big actions.
Oh, you think
Oh, yeah. Sorry. No, I'm just saying you seem like an action printer, like all these physical actions that like carving things out of space.
Yeah. Never thought of it that way. Huh. Printmaking is very active. You're constantly moving. You're constantly aware of your body within the space and other people around you and how people see things as well. So, yeah. And you're thinking in layers as well.
I think that's the same for writing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it can be always moving things around. And
Yeah.
Ideally, it's very physical also. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you don't think so?
No, yes, no. I love it. Do we wait for questions, or can we just keep talking up here?
Anybody have a question?
Could you just please keep talking among yourselves?
I want to ask you about that little tiny touch of color. How did that feel?
It was a blue somebody brought back from somewhere?
Yeah, a good friend of mine brought back some blue pigment from the Jardin de Mazarin in Morocco. Am I saying it? Oh, right. On a trip from Morocco, and he's just like, hey, I brought back this pigment for you, and I felt kind of bad, like, I'm never going to use this. Like, it's blue. It's like, and it just sat in my studio for about maybe 3 years, maybe more, actually. And then I just, I started tinkering around with the idea of introducing more color back into it. So I see my work in color, even though it's all graphite and people think it's monochromatic, because color starts to show through from the paper. And then the paper itself also, there's some natural creams and so forth, and then it's the way how the inks and the graphite start to react with it, and then lighting, you throw that into it. So the eyes start to, there's tricks on the eyes. You start to see a bit of color.
Basically work with light. That's
Yes.
all of that is about capturing and emitting light, right?
Yeah.
More questions.
Yeah, we don't want to.
Maybe we do.
Takes one person to get the ball rolling.
What got you off the boat?
What got me off the boat? I was on the boat for 10 years, on 2 different boats for 10 years, and then kind of part of it was getting sober. And then suddenly, a lot of things just stopped making sense that made sense before. I stayed in the boat. I think I was on the boat for another year or 2 after I got sober, but suddenly I was like, this is a lot of fucking work. It just sort of, it was time to come to land. It was kind of time to come to land.
How does that work? Because you said it had no, sorry. You had no engine, so how did you get back and forth?
Rhode. Yeah, rowboats. Yeah, yeah. But I also my job was to drive a boat too. I had so occasionally, but I couldn't really drive myself out. I could drive other people out sometimes, but yeah, I could drive a boat. So yeah, I was rowing back and forth.
Nick, how much of that story was written down in the time, and how much of it have you had to extract from?
Yeah, none of it was really written down. Well, no, I wrote a lot down. I just recently went into, I had a box in my attic of notebooks from my 20s, and I just recently went and got that box and opened it to read, to figure out who I was back then. And I was sort of terrified. I didn't really want to know. And then it turns out I'm not that bad. It
Well,
turns
there's
out,
no
like I thought I was going to be like sort of terrible, and you know, a little you know, very existential. A lot of there's some, you know, some sort of you know, hackneyed philosophy, but I'm glad I got what I did get. There's some nice stuff. So, yeah.
How do you feel about being able to, I mean, you said you just wrote that yesterday.
No, I didn't just write that. I wrote one passage
One
yesterday.
passage. But
Oh yeah.
to just even that, like to read that
Yeah.
so suddenly.
Yeah, my
without much-
workshop would know what passage it was because I read it in the workshop too.
Okay.
So I wanted to jam it in so you guys would be inspired to do the same tomorrow.
Because I feel like it's such a vulnerable moment to, you know, to read something or even to show something that you haven't really had that much time to sit with or process.
Yeah.
So I just,
Um,
just curious.
Yeah, I mean it's you know it's sort of part of the job, right? Yeah. So it's, you know, to I mean, how, you know, the same for you, maybe to show your process, you know, to show to show stuff that this is how we got to it. Yeah, well, it is. It can be unnerving, but it's okay. Yeah, I can be unnerved. Yeah, I don't mind. Oh yeah, yeah. Does she need a microphone or? Yeah. I can speak loud enough. It's for the folks at home. It's for the in TV land.
That was selfish of me.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay. I have a kind of a double question, and I hope that I will manage to phrase it. Nick, one of your books was adapted for the screen, made into a film, so I wanted to know if you had any say about the way it was made and how you felt about the way it turned out to be in images. And kind of in reverse, Simonette, would you consider having your drawings and creations, for example, turned into words by a poet or a writer? Sorry, I hope this makes sense.
Yeah, I actually had a really good experience with the film thing. The people I worked with, I really liked. And is this on? This works? Yeah. Is it on? Yeah, it's on light on. Hello? Is that? Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, I was really lucky. The screenwriter / director and I became friends. He worked on the screenplay for 7 years. He showed me like all the drafts of it, and I gave him notes on them. You know, I talk about it at some point in the book that I'm writing now. I mentioned just briefly that in one of the early screenplays, he just sort of wrote me as being like very like ineffectual. Like, so I like had a boat, but I never got it in the water. Like, I just couldn't quite get my shit together to get the boat in the water. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm a fucking captain. Like, I got the fucking boat in the water. Like, but he just sort of wanted me to really sort of like ne'er-do-well and just just have a boat, and I had a dream of getting the boat in the water. I'm like, yeah, this thing just keeps dying. The light keeps going off. It's working. What's that? It's working. Oh, it's working? Oh, okay. Okay. So and then the film itself is like maybe not the film I would have made, but I thought it was a good film. It was decent. Like, I think the middle of it's really good. Like the beginning and the end are sort of a little odd, but you know, it's sort of But I think the center is like really kind of beautiful of it. And I got to be on set every day. Like they wanted me on set every day, which is really odd. They don't usually do that, but it's just I kind of I've done a lot of collaborating with a lot of different artists, and so I sort of know how to just just shut up, you know, and just sort of like, I don't know how to direct, like, but they had questions for it. They didn't know, you know, none of them knew, you know, surprise, like, you know, Hollywood people had never been in a shelter before, a homeless shelter. And so I sort of saw my job as just to, you know, after seeing films, Hollywood films, portray homelessness, I just desperately didn't want the homeless to be stereotyped. And so that sort of seemed like my job, like on the set. I didn't care how I was portrayed, really, you know, but so I tried to do that, yeah. And part of this book I'm doing now, that last picture that we saw up there was my friend Richard, and he was portrayed in the film. You know, he just sort of makes a brief appearance in the book it was based on, but it just sort of might have said that he was gay or something in the book. It didn't say much about him, but it didn't say much about the actor who played him. Just made him like really like sort of like stereotypically gay in this sort of like thing. And you know, when I saw it, I was sort of horrified. Like Richard would have been horrified by that. Like he was just this sort of tough guy. Like it just wasn't the way he was. And his sister actually like contacted me afterwards and said, "Why'd you do that to Richard?" Like, and, you know, Richard died, you know, was dead, and I just felt bad. So at some point, like a year ago, like it just sort of rose up, and I just sort of like Richard started coming out. It's sort of to make a fuller portrait of Richard in some way, you know, as a response to the film version of Richard. So, yeah.
What was that room in the picture?
That was his loft in New York. Yeah.
It looks like the kind of place that was where you find things in the street, but they're carefully curated to make a beautiful room.
Yeah. Well, he made all those things. That was his art. Like those sculptures and stuff was his art. So, yeah.
And was it like an abandoned building? Like kind of like, you know, back in the days you can.
It was down in Wall Street on Trinity Place, and it was just like a big office building that they just took a floor over and, you know, just made it into lofts, like artist lofts. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, right. What was, okay, I'm so sorry. Could you repeat that again?
Yeah, how would you feel about, I mean, would you consider submitting your work to a writer and have them turn your creations into words?
Into words, you said? Or?
Yeah.
Poetry. Okay. Yeah. I would absolutely love that. I've had a version of that happen where it was a student who did it. I'm trying to remember which show it was. And the student responded to it, and she wrote this really beautiful poetry from Pace University, and wrote this really beautiful response to one of the pieces that was done. But I would absolutely, yes, welcome that. Love it. Yeah.
This is one for all three of you. We've been talking a lot about what is an artist after that panel in town, and I'm wondering what allows you to continue making work, because that seems to be the one thing, is just to somehow continue. And what do you call upon, or what motivates you or allows you to continue?
I think you should start, Mark.
You know, I love it. You can't stop. I'm a fucking beginner at almost everything I'm doing, it feels like. And there's a lot of stories to tell. Like, I don't know. You guys help me out here.
For me, I feel like I have to. You know, every time I keep going back to this thing, like, every time I draw, I feel like it records this exact moment. And you can't recreate that. You could try your best to, you know. That's why sometimes I just turn the phone off when I'm in the studio, because if I'm making marks and it feels a certain way, a distraction can change how your hand moves across that paper or over that plate. and you cannot get that back. And so once, you know, yeah, I just have to. And then there's that fight, like maybe part of the ego kind of comes into this, because you feel like, I know I want to do this. Can I do it? And then you start to, and then you have this moment like, oh my God, what did I, But then you're like, no, I'm great, I can do this.
Important.
And you get through it, and then somehow you're, at the end, you're like, oh wow, this actually worked. And then it's just like, oh, let's do it again. It's like almost abuse, you know?
And
Let's do it again.
like
and
how
then
much
you find
of-
yourself again in it.
How much of the process is actually cultivating mental health?
Probably all of it. Or even the cleaning of the studio, walking out. I mean, I probably look like weirdo, like peek through the door. Sometimes I walk out the studio in the hallway, and I know people have seen me do this. And I'm just standing like on the other side, and I'm just looking in at all the works on all sides. And I'm just kind of like, oh. And I can see them walk past, kind of like. They walk past, and they're like, what is she doing? See, that's probably what they're thinking. But there's those moments when you're like, yeah, okay. And then you come back in, and you sit with it, and then you just keep beating yourself up. But there's something about that process. You just have to do it. I don't know. Yeah. You they all look
For me, you know, when I was younger, I had a bunch of jobs. I was an electrician for like 5 years, and then I got the ship's captain's thing. And the electrician thing, after like 5 years, from like I was like 19 to like early 20s, and it was really good. I really liked it. I really liked having the lights go on. I thought it seemed like a really cool thing. But then after like 5 years, I was like, so this is my whole life? Like, I'm gonna make the lights go on? Like, okay, like I've done it like already a bunch of times. Like, will this? I don't know if this is gonna be enough, you know, like to do it. And then I was trying to write at that time, and I could not write a poem. I could make the lights go on, but I could not write a poem. Like, it was the hardest thing I knew I could ever do. And I just kept thinking like, wow, I want to do that. I want to do the hardest thing I know how to do, which is to write a poem. And it still is. It's still the hardest thing I know how to do. It's like really hard, and that's what. It's sort of, and a lot of the people I admired were like really old and still trying to figure it out, like Stanley Kunitz. Like, you know, I got to hang out with Stanley Kunitz, and he was like really old, and he was still like just like pushing through, like and finding excitement in what he did. You know, maybe I really admire an electrician, a good electrician. You know, I love. You know, like you know, we all need a good electrician, but it just wasn't me. Like even driving a boat, like I could be, you know, Captain Nick. You know, but like I don't know if this is gonna keep me going. Like it was sort of trying to find something that would sort of keep me going. You know, so that's it.
There's one other thing I think about, and that is, I remember watching the Laramie Project, and it's been restaged over time, but it's old now, and thinking, yeah, for a while thinking, oh, this is an old thing, and it, you know, and people don't think about it anymore, but it exists in the world, and the things we make, they exist in the world to be found by the world. You know, you make stuff and it's out there. You don't know where it's going to go, who's going to find it, and who it's going to mean something to.
Yeah, I don't think about y'all.
Hi, I think this is a question for Mark. I'm wondering what a map is to you, and if that's changed over time. Like I thought the work sort of looking at the history of the coastline and sort of mapping on like both the past and present of like place, kind of spatially, was really cool. And I guess I'm wondering what a map is to you. And then this is like a B part question, because it seemed like you worked with like young people. Yeah. I'm wondering like in that work, like for youth, like how can we use art to talk about place? And like, because you mentioned also like mapping place in your workshop. Yeah.
Cool, thanks for that question. First thing I thought of was I did kind of a residency with the MFA program Goddard, and I put out my big map in the theater and said, I'm not going to give a talk. We're going to just walk around on the map. And the most common reaction I got is, we don't trust maps. We don't trust the language of maps. And it's true that, when you make a map, you throw away most of the information. Every map, these guys were working on mapping a certain kind of forest in Siberia at this lab I was at. And, so this is all this cedar forest. And he goes, no. The cedars are only like 1 in 100 of the trees there, but it's the one we care about because there's money in those trees. So we're calling it cedar forest, And that is the mapping process. And it's the way we understand the world. You can't take in every bit of information. One thing about kids and babies and dogs is, I was saying this in the class, like there's this cognitive map in your head. And if you drive around with the dog knows the final corner when you're turning into the street where you live, right? And the baby does too. If you I don't know how they do it, but kids have a cognitive map of the things. It's not to scale, but we start mapping very young. Let's see, was there another part of that question? Anyway.
You could talk all night about maps.
I could.
Has it changed over time, he asked?
Oh.
If your impression has changed over time.
Of how we use maps, or how, or
Just what a map is,
yeah,
or it can be.
Yeah, a map's a snapshot in time, and so how do you get over that? Because you can map. So we're working with the shoreline. I had the privilege of working with this guy who co-authored that little geology book. He came here in the 50s to use map information from the 1880s, and then I helped him in the 2000s. So we had this information about where the coast was over 130 years, and the average of that. So you almost need mathematics to see this like changing fluid coastline over time. But I think that's going to be really important. It's changed. Your whole outlook on the world should be, where am I now, what's going on now, and where was it a long time ago, and where is it going? There's nothing stable in the physical world around us. But maybe what we need to know is the forces that made the map, waves, tides, gravity, weather, and then we can kind of like prepare ourselves for where the map's going to be. I don't know. Is that too out there?
No, it's just interesting because the first thing I thought about when you said people said they didn't trust maps, all I kept thinking about was as a teenager or going on family trips. And my dad would the honor was who gets to read the map in the back, and you've got this big thing that you've got to unfold, and he's got all these little notes and and you've got to follow. And now it's just that doesn't even exist anymore. But I feel like when I heard that, when you say that, I thought, well, actually, would I trust the maps more from back then, the physical thing, versus Google Maps now? Do you know what I mean?
Occasionally,
anyways,
has Google Maps ever sent you?
It sent me the wrong way. So
Yeah.
that's why I'm like, how do you?
Into some crazy places,
Yeah,
right?
to hear you say they don't trust it, but then anyway. So.
I went the wrong way a lot with the paper maps too. Yeah.
Yeah, like the highway maps and family vacations and stuff, and then they would go, oh, there's a new freeway. It's not on the map yet. That era is gone, but I don't know, maps. What are maps?
Any one last question? I don't know. Should I say that?
Let's just go with that.
Okay.
It's for Simonette. It's the piece that you had, and it's Night Gardener. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It's gripping on the edges. The hands are gripping right at the base of the piece, holding on. What is hanging from below? Is it a chain? Is it beads? Is it rosary beads? Is it a chain? Can you explain the work a little bit more for me? Because I got captured by that piece.
Okay. So there's a lot of cultural signifiers that I put into the work, and if someone doesn't have any knowledge of it or can make a reference to it, I think I like to think aesthetically it's still pleasing on the eye, right? But everything in each piece has a meaning. There's a language in the flowers and the foliage and and so for you to pick up the beads. So the beads are, in the Caribbean we call them jumby beads, but it looks almost like a snap peas, like a snap pea, and inside usually we'll open it up. You wait till it dries, and it's this black and red bead or seed that comes out of it. If it's ingested, it can be poisonous, but quite often you would see people make jewelry out of it, either jewelry or some type of a rosary out of it. And it also has certain spiritual connotations. So if you see that, you kind of know, like, oh, okay, somebody might be into that. But I'm also using it within this piece as a way to reference this loss of innocence. So it kind of wraps around her hands and then it falls to the floor. And then there's this pivotal moment where the hand is almost about to touch it, but then it wraps itself back to this plumeria flower. So without giving up too much, but yeah, that's kind of, yeah.
All right.
Let's have it done.
Thanks, everyone.
Nick Flynn, Mark Adams, and Simonette Quamina. And with the bang. Don't forget to, Mark and Nick will be signing books at the back. Check out the exhibition if you haven't seen it yet. And remember, tomorrow night is student night. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
And Jim missed too. I'm like,